detoxification, then you know that by taking, and now this is all research stuff, you cannot get sulfated adrenal hormones anywhere except for a few places that are for research only. And I did it for the first time over the past 4 days. And man, I tell you, man, that stuff, remember when you said that, well, I think we're being recorded, so I was gonna use some slang, but I mean, it was amazing. It's like all of a sudden you go from switched off to switched on. And that is a big part of the issue, I think, when people are complaining of chronic fatigue, they can't break out of it. And it's because they don't have the neurohormones to open up those pathways again. And you need NMDA and dopamine and all of those things to feel like a normal person. Okay, but I should probably do my lecture.
Sure.
Okay, and actually this will tie into the lecture.
All right, this is. All right.
How do I limit the screen here? Trying to.
It's good.
Okay.
That's great.
All right, cool. Okay, so they asked me to do a lecture on psoriasis since I have it, and I think somebody else has it.
I have it.
Right. And the reason why this is something to go deeper into is the fact that it's not just a skin thing. It's a total immune system issue. Now, in all fairness, I think it's reasonable to realize that this is, these all of this stuff, these detoxification bottlenecks and these very strong immune systems, call it hyperinflammation. These are not necessarily weaknesses. Okay, this is not like, oh, something's wrong with you, you're born defective. It actually could be a sign that you were designed to be able to fight off pathogens, like have a very strong immune system that could fight off pathogens. The problem is we're not dealing with pathogens. We're dealing with something else. And this something else, or these engineered pathogens, they what's the right wording? I would say that they trick the immune system. So they overactivate an already strong immune system, or they trigger dysfunction of that strong immune system, eliciting a overly strong inflammatory response directed in all the wrong directions. See, it kind of makes sense. If you want to defeat the enemy, you got to get rid of the strong ones.
That's right. You explained it to me. Our bodies develop to fight infections, parasites, and wounds. Now we don't have that so much. We got antibiotics for that, and now our immune system is reacting to tungsten in our bodies, of all things.
Yeah, exactly. It's overreacting, and it's in these. And when it comes to heavy metals, they are actually, and it's all about mimicking. That's what I've learned. Heavy metals, endocrine disruptors, and these infections that are more or less engineered, they're mimicking. They're mimicking Lyme. They're mimicking, and it's that mimicking that tricks the body. And these heavy metals mimic our natural minerals. And so if they start to push our minerals aside and sort of take their place, they're close enough in, they look the same, they're the same density, but they're not the mineral, so they don't perform the action.
So you're
So
telling
then
me there's more than just the halide column that mimics, you know?
what do you mean?
It goes beyond just fluoride mimicking iodine and sitting in the receptors that iodine would sit in.
Oh my goodness, they're all mercury apparently mimics selenium.
Oh no, that's
Yes,
terrible.
right. I mean, I sometimes I forget which ones. Thallium mimics potassium. So what's that going to do to the potassium? Potassium's on the inside of the cell wall. How is that going to change the
Arrhythmias.
regulation of what goes in and out?
Yeah.
Right? And same thing with magnesium. I think it's cadmium, don't quote me, that mimics magnesium. And magnesium is what I mean stabilizes a lot of things. And really the
Wow.
heavy
So that would explain a lot of the nutrient deficiencies I see because I'm so confused sometimes. I'm like, well, I eat a good diet. I take these vitamins. Why am I still deficient? And why is my cellular still so deficient? Not serum. I'm looking at cellular and I'm still deficient.
well, that's a great question because I think about that a lot too. I think, I mean, obviously, okay, our food is mineral deficient. We know that, but I mean, significantly. But then we do all of the supplementation, even high-end supplements that are better absorbed, or we get them through the IVs. Um, one of my thoughts is that this absorption issue post-COVID, the stuff that is contaminating our food, produces could be, this is a theory and a question, is it possible that it's producing a layer, like a hydrogel layer on the inside of the wall of the gut, which literally creates a barrier to
Mhm.
absorption. Okay, that's another thing. And then, like you said, are these heavy metals that we're being filled with displacing because they mimic? So the cell can't tell the difference. It's like it looks like potassium, it looks like magnesium, it lets it in, and then magnesium is responsible for stabilizing ATP. And then what I realized is that our minerals actually they're stabilizers in many ways. I mean, calcium's kind of like a more like a ignition or a spark plug. Um, you know, but in general, it seems like a lot of the metals like selenium, it stabilizes the glutathione system. It keeps it stable and not so reactive. And so it's kind of like buildings that are cement, but they've got the metal the metal um, tubes or whatever on the inside. They
Oh,
kind
God.
of what's that?
I think it's um they're rods. Yeah. Keep
Rods, right? They're like rods that sort of stabilize the structure. And think about it. I mean,
apart.
the minerals are metals, or they're transition metals, or they're salts, or they're in that spectrum. So they're going to be sort of stabilizers. Like we use metals in the outside world that are durable. Okay, and those are just, again, those are me imagining, well, what the hell, what does what? Um, was there anything else that we were contemplating?
Good start. Next slide. Let's see what else.
Okay. Okay, so I made this up fairly quickly, so I'm gonna give anybody the chance to chime in, add to the lecture because I'm feel like we're learning as we go, really redefining everything. So psoriasis is a chronic systemic disease, not just a skin disease. Prevalence 2 to 3% globally, according to the references I have, which that's a fairly small percentage, but it impacts skin, joints, cardiovascular, metabolic, and mental health, which is why act so crazy sometimes. Well, not too crazy. Why some people, well, maybe more crazy than I think, but okay. Why some people get psoriasis? Well, there is a genetic predisposition. Now, the question is it a weakness or are these castle genes? Okay. Castle genes are, you could think of them as, somebody whose genes didn't live around a bunch of toxicity historically, and they had a very strong immune system to fight off infection. So we're not defective.
Right.
It's a genetic marker. HLA, I have a little reference here just to um, remind us of some of this stuff. These are human leukocyte antigens. So this is just something that they can detect on I believe on the T cells. It's just a peptide that it's just there. I guess you could call it a signature. And it has something to do with uh, the T cells are expressing, and in addition to TNF alpha, they're also expressing interleukin 23 in addition to interleukin 6. I mean, these genes are involved in immune regulation and inflammatory pathways like all the other ones. It's just that this is the signature. Look, what sets it off? I mean, just you could be fine until adulthood, and then boom, some sort of stressor sets it off, and there you go. I think, you know what I think it is? And I've been wondering about this with the skin. There's been why would over the past 40, 50 years, why would all of a sudden there be all of this stuff? Is it possible that whatever is touching the skin initially, because that's where it usually starts, is again something that is tricking or not tricking, it's overactivating. It's not natural. So a very strong immune system is going to seem overreactive because there's things hitting our skin, chemicals, and maybe things coming from the air that are causing a response. Now, that's just my thought. So, according to the literature, some people get psoriasis, barrier dysfunction, keratinocyte stress, immune activation. I think there's a reason for the keratinite stress. We're all essentially exposed to most of the same stuff. It's just that some people are going to react to it or not. I guess some HLA markers are stronger than others. I don't think there's anything significant about this number. Just know that some people, maybe this is the one that's more common. That's all I got to say about that. Um, this this isn't saying a whole lot. All this is saying to me is that there are different kinds of psoriatic outbreaks. In fact, I saw a guttate psoriasis with a patient who was 21 years old after she had a surgery, and all of a sudden she had this huge breakout on her leg, and it just looked like little circular patches, like smaller than what you would see for a typical psoriasis. You see them in certain parts of the body. And for this lecture, I didn't really include all of that stuff where the rashes are, focusing more on the immune system. And again, it's a Th17. Now we're all familiar with that. Th17 overexpression, and it may be that it also, maybe it's Th17 plus this interleukin 23 expression that they're going hand in hand together, which makes an exaggerated immune response. Okay, so it's the dendritic cells that secrete the interleukin 23, which activates the Th17 cells. Okay, so I guess if you don't have psoriasis, you don't have dendritic cells secreting this extra interleukin 23. And then Th17 cells release interleukin 17 and interleukin 22. So there's this interleukin 22 going on. And then the interleukin 17 recruits neutrophils and stimulates keratinocytes. Interleukin 22 promotes keratinocyte hyperproliferation, leading to thickened plaques. And then TNF alpha amplifies this inflammatory loop. Key teaching point, psoriasis is a interleukin 23 Th17 driven with TNF alpha as an amplifier. Interesting. This explains why biologics target Th17, interleukin 23, or TNF alpha. So that's the main theme here. And I think why the skin is involved so much of the time, especially early on, is, that's where a lot of our dendritic cells are in our skin, and then having this additional stimulation. Pathogenesis, immune circuitry. Again, interleukin 17, neutrophil recruitment. That's from the Th17 cells, the T cells that have been alerted by the dendritic cells. And that's what's causing the keratinocyte to activate and maybe it's trying to make a stronger barrier because it thinks it's being attacked when it's really probably being unnaturally activated. Interleukin 22 is also over proliferating the keratinocytes. So I mean, it's straightforward. It's interleukin 22, interleukin 17, and that's not everybody is releasing that. Hyperinflammation. Well, not sure what the significance of this is. Well, okay, the skin lesions contain infiltrates of CD4 helper T cells, CD8 cytotoxic T cells, dendritic cells, and neutrophils. Okay, so a full-on inflammatory response is happening, but to what? See, that's the question. To what? So you get this I like that, cytokine soup. I think I can remember that. A cytokine soup of interleukin 6, TNF alpha, interleukin 17, interleukin 22. Even unaffected skin harbors primed resident T cells. Okay, so it just explained like they're just already there and primed, like they're ready to fight. And that's where the chronicity and the relapses happen. But yeah. Okay, so what is the consequence then of this sort of situation where people with with extra protection that's being exploited, that's being set off because of all these weird chemicals and their genes were not designed to live in toxicityville. There's increased cardiovascular risk, atherosclerosis, metabolic syndrome, and diabetes. And really, why? Well, it's because metabolic syndrome and diabetes are more common in psoriasis, likely due to chronic cytokine activation affecting insulin signaling. I mean, we know that. Patients also experience higher rates of depression and fatigue. Hmm. I mean, I consider myself to be an optimistic person. So, you know, that probably buffers some of that depression, but I've had clear depression, not the woe is me depression, but the no dopamine. I mean, it really, you could break it that it could be as simple as no neurochemicals present. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. And systemic inflammation always accelerates atherosclerosis. I mean, that's it's vasculitis, and that's a whole set of mechanisms that involves the loosening up of the tight junctions, and then the white cells and the cholesterol get in there and form foam cells, and that's all inflammation driven. Autoimmune overlap. Okay, so I saw this with my mother that one thing led to the next, led to the next. Um, a version of Crohn's disease and thyroid disease. And again, I mean, think about it. The gut is also like a barrier. And think about the food we're eating has all these unnatural things that are unnaturally triggering a strong immune system, leading to, again, a immune system that's fighting. It's being overly triggered. And then the same thing with the thyroid. Think about all of the things that are passing through the thyroid gland. I mean, it's a high flow organ. And whatever isn't being filtered out by the liver, this is kind of how I see it, then it has to get through the thyroid, and that irritation of the thyroid then of course can set off those those uh those warrior T cells that are just ready to hack anything. So psoriasis and fatigue. Fatigue is common in psoriasis, not just depression. Okay, so that's me, but it wasn't always me. Okay, and maybe it was me and I didn't realize it, but it didn't hit. It's like there was a burden that hit at a certain point, age, hormone status, toxicity status, like a perfect storm scenario, you know, put me it put me in an unnatural state that I had never experienced before. Cytokine driven, TNF alpha, again, interleukin 6, interleukin 17, mitochondrial stress. I mean, that's sort of basic fundamental. I mean, anytime you have too much inflammation, you're going to have oxidative stress, and oxidative stress in general affects mitochondrial function. It doesn't have everything that it needs to, well, those free radicals, I guess you could say, affect the battery, damaging to the ability to form a, a polarity, a separation of charges that leads to the energy potential to produce the ATP that's needed for enzymatic reactions and stabilization of proteins. That's one way to see it. So the more systemic inflammation, the more fatigue. Okay, now amplifiers of fatigue are chronic Lyme-like syndromes. And I'm going to suggest, and I've got a video out, and if we have time, I'll play it. It's only like 5 minutes long. I had the epiphany that what if the things I saw under the microscope, that increased dramatically this year. Okay. What if this was sort of an expression of a chronic Lyme-like syndrome that is creating a persistent immune activation? In fact, it's creating very specific immune responses to various shapes. And what if those shapes look like the receptors? Again, mimickers. Now, I'm hoping that this creates an aha and you go, oh my gosh, okay, I'm glad I'm sitting here listening to this lecture, because to me, that's starting to make sense. Now we read things like, okay, the immune system is reacting to part of the Lyme, and all we think of is this little bacteria with a spirochete. Okay, but it's a shapeshifter, right? Shape shifts into all these different things. Well, what do I see under the microscope? A lot of different things. And the immune system, in being overly reactive, is going to overly react to different shapes, shapeshifter shapes that resemble certain receptors. Okay, and other things. Okay, so now we've got autoantibodies to neurotransmitter receptors, and eventually I'm going to use myself as a case study where we can look at the neurozoomer as able to show all the different pathways, the receptors, the amount of inflammation and suppression. And it's amazing how it always ends up being the ones you need the most, the ones that to think, to have drive, to get up and go, get things done. In fact, when you look at, I had two patients who can't talk anymore. They're autistic, and I'm seeing antibodies to voltage-gated calcium channels. Ironic, one of them couldn't talk after the vaccine, his second COVID vaccine, or whatever you want to call it. And the other one was a girl who was not vaccinated, but somehow got bitten by a tick when she was 2 years old, and she couldn't talk after the age of 3. Now, the question is, if it's a voltage gated channel, and then it's a triad actually for these two, because they have movements that you can specifically say, okay, that is nicotinic acetylcholine receptor dysfunction. That one is NMDA, or I'm sorry, dopamine 2 receptor suppression, leading to incongruent smiling, or shaking of the head, or the nicotinic cause stereotypy, and the voltage gated channels are causing sort of misfiring of the nicotinic receptors, because calcium channels are sort of the higher up, nicotinic underneath, and then NMDA, dopaminergic, glutaminergic, GABA are at the bottom. So the top one has more effect on the other ones. And I thought, you know what? This may be more of a perfect science than I thought. What if we could modulate, or what does modulate the voltage-gated calcium channels? Or are they dead? Well, it turns out they're not dead, at least from my understanding. Okay, so now we've got an amplifier of fatigue, because all of that chronic neurological inflammation and antibodies to various neural pathways to the receptors that sort of look like fragments of Lyme, potentially, okay, causes a low release of adrenal hormones. And you can see this on lab tests where I have a very low DHEAS. And it's important to know that the sulfated It's the S that makes all the difference. Because the sulfated when DHEA and pregnenolone really have a short half-life, and most of what their job is to convert into the other hormones, cortisol and estrogen and testosterone. But there's this little secret, unless maybe I just didn't know, and you guys all knew this, this was all common sense, that our brain, the sulfated version of DHEA and pregnenolone, their primary job is to modulate the neural pathways and the receptors. That's literally what they're for. And so I always wondered why I would take testosterone and felt no different. Especially when you're at that collapse stage where you hit that breaking point where the dominoes just fall and you go from who you were to this other person who can't function, at least function the way that he knew how to or she knew how to, and then nobody understands because they look somewhat normal. I mean, I'm a little puffy from all the I had to take hydrocortisone on a regular basis, and that, it's one thing after another, just trying anything. And the problem is you're so toxic, you don't have, if you try to exert yourself, like I've always been an athlete, then you're getting short of breath, you're getting even more inflamed. So you're caught in this vicious cycle. And at this time, because we're being hit with the perfect storm, really most people don't really know exactly all of the different things that are happening all at the same time. I mean, you can't, like I said before, what I've learned is I couldn't think about medicine the way that I did last year or the year before or the year before, because we're being bombarded with all of these things and they show up like tungsten, like where did that come from? All these heavy metals, mineral imbalances. And of course, we need those mineral balances for detox and for mitochondrial function and for, to regulate make sure that the heart is beating regular. A lot of palpitations happening. Then you throw on electromagnetic pulses and frequencies that are absolutely, totally, and completely abnormal. I don't care what anybody says. It's not normal. It's destructive, especially when you have all of these things going on and you've got thallium mimicking potassium, and you've got all of these different misfirings happening, and suddenly people are having more palpitations or irregular heartbeats, and sometimes they're fatal. And sometimes they seem to happen at 3 o'clock in the morning when my ears start ringing from an obvious change in electromagnetic frequency. Okay, so detox bottlenecks. So the toxins build up because inflammation it slows everything down. And then you get this buildup, especially if you've got polymorphisms in multiple pathways. Now, we were talking about this earlier, to have a nice little map that lays it all out. Boom. Methylation, sulfation, glutathione, glucuronidation, acetylation. Those are phase 2. That's at phase 2 detox pathways. And you've got it basically for methylation, you've got to, especially if you've got a polymorphism, you have to take methyl B12 and folate. And then another one, sometimes that's not thought of, is trimethyl glycine, TMG. It's really those three are required to produce they call it SAMe, to produce um, the thing, the molecule that is required, the enzyme that's required for sorry, maybe a cofactor that's required for sulfation. And guess what? If sulfation is needed for breaking down a lot of things, estrogen for one thing, there's estrogen dominance, BPA, we're filled with plastic chemicals. BPA mimics estrogen. It's all about the mimic. It's all about being slick. Then guess what? You burn up all of your sulfation transferase enzymes that are needed to conjugate your DHEA and pregnenolone with sulfur. And so you can't just eat a bunch of garlic and say, I'll just take my DHEA and pregnenolone and have in garlic and I got it all figured out. No, that's where they trick us. It doesn't work like that. So bottleneck sulfation, you can't sulfate, they're already low. And then we're getting into dangerous territory here. Research hypothesis. Now, by the way, I have been taking a DHEA S formula compound for research. I could only find it, you can't get them at our compounding. You got to get these places and places that nobody knows about for research only. And I tell you, if I look animated, it's going to feel freaking phenomenal for once. Okay, so I think that we're on to something. Okay. Because I'm not so sure I could detox my way with the amount of toxicity and get to this point. It would be very nice to be able to upregulate my pathways, and it'll be so much easier to exercise and to detox at a higher level and have better metabolism and start to get rid of the things that are exacerbating all of this inflammation, plugging up all of the detoxification pathways, and basically literally turning certain people into literally. Stefan, remember that tennis player we were talking about?
Yeah, I saw the video.
Yeah, he went from he was on top of his game, and then he just all of a sudden he was debilitated.
Debilitated, a vegetative state almost. I mean,
Yeah, right. And it was from sparked with it. You never know what it was, but probably I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't a combination of Lyme and Epstein-Barr. And I mean, it just goes from one thing to the next. Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus. What's that?
it's like whack-a-mole. Like, which stealth infection do you want to start with first?
Exactly. And then there's these human endogenous retroviruses that are dormant that they call them the ancient retroviruses, that you got 100 million years ago. I mean, sometimes I'm like, yeah, okay. Or maybe it was a couple of generations ago, whatever. It gets into the germline. And so we have certain retroviruses that are happen to be called junk genes. I'd rather know them for what they are, that can be activated by the herpes virus family. And those, depending on which signature you have, now mine is probably, and we can't test for it, is HERV, HERVW. And guess what that does? It releases, I think it's not the whole virus, it's like the capsid or a piece of the virus. And guess what that does? Hyper inflames it causes the immune system to go wild. So it's like brain inflammation upon brain inflammation, upon psoriasis, upon antibodies, upon Lyme, upon Epstein-Barr, upon human endogenous retroviruses, and nobody can understand why Dr. Joseph is so freaking tired. I mean, serious. Um, I'm doing better now because I think we're on to something. Psoriasis plus systemic hyperinflammation can converge with Lyme spectrum, immune dysregulation, and adrenal suppression, severe CS. And the thing is, man, it's all chance. You either have it or you don't. You know, I mean, you either have the combination of too many bottlenecks and and then everybody thinks that you just can't figure he just can't take care of himself. And that mayonnaise was not my mayonnaise, by the way. So,
Okay.
um, um, there's always another level, but you see what I mean? There's a bigger thing happening. And so I think it's almost like if we can get we got to get some of these things, these fundamental things that we don't really understand so much. If we can get those handled, then we can get them to the next step, and then they can exercise more, and then they can start to get in a positive spiral that can lead to the possibility of getting out of this funk. So yeah, the adrenal suppression, severe C, chronic fatigue syndrome phenotype. It's a phenotype. When I hear people say, "Oh, you just need to eat your greens, Dr. Joseph," I mean, come on, that's stuff. Oh, that worsens the inflammation.
Sometimes.
Research hypothesis, mechanisms, neuroinflammation, antibody mediated. We got the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal access suppression, low neurosteroids, detox bottlenecks, resulting in more oxidative stress, but also less production of low DHEA and low Pregnenolone S. These neurosteroids normally buffer inflammation and support energy. In fact, they actually modulate interleukin 6, Th17, and interleukin 1. I mean, the primary drivers of inflammation, and I'd be curious if it has effect on the interleukin 22. I mean, you know if if there's a cascade of dendritic cells that are being set off, and that's being modulated, then they may not be producing the interleukin 23, which is overactivating the T cells, the Th17 cells. And then it just something here, just the amplifiers of fatigue. I just want to make mention, even says here, autoantibodies against neurotransmitter receptors, dopamine, NMDA, nicotinic acetylcholine receptors can impair concentration, mood, and cognitive clarity. Okay, so my proposal, which is backed up by references, so it's not like I just dreamt this one up. I searched and searched and searched, and I guess somebody said, "Seek, and you shall receive." Neurosteroid research model. Here's what I think would be a great addition on top of what Dr. Halassa has created. So kudos to Dr. Halassa here. I always give him the credit. Even if he doesn't understand my fatigue. So, joke. Morning, what if we could have a combination of Pregnenolone S and DHEA S and oxytocin in a sublingual with cyclodextrin? I'm telling you, already just DHEAS makes me feel like a normal person so far after 3 days, 50% of the day so far, a normal person. Whereas I normally
Because you figured out that you don't sulfate your DHEA when you take it?
correct. Because well, first of all, here's the problem. So the question is, well, what if you took high amounts of DHEA? Well, theoretically, because I have a sulfation bottleneck, that I do have a SULT polymorphism that is weak, that causes backup, I guess. So I end up utilizing a lot of put it like this, it's almost like everything else gets um, sulfated, and by the time it gets to the DHEA and the pregnenolone, there's nothing left. That's one way to see it. My DHEAS level is 7, and the normal is somewhere between
7?
7. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so low.
Yeah, exactly.
DHEA was 7 on a blood test?
That's why I complain all the time that I don't have any energy. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, give me your feedback on that. I mean,
Well, when I've seen this in people, they always have an autoimmune condition. It's lupus or it's a Crohn's colitis or something of that nature. And they always have a low DHEA. And I've seen 7, but it's been like 20s, 30s. Yeah.
yeah. And so, the question is psoriasis even more inflammatory? Well, we know Crohn's is in the same ballpark as psoriasis. Um, Now, maybe, because in order for me to function, I've had to take a low dose of hydrocortisone. I'm
Yeah.
sure that that's having a suppressive effect. Okay, that's a real thing. Um,
Little, yeah.
I haven't, I don't
So
really.
it's because when you are in those inflammatory autoimmune conditions, you burn through your cortisol. And so you need some cortisol and to feel some normalcy.
Exactly. That was the first thing, according to Jeffers, if you took a certain amount of cortisone, say up to 10 milligrams 4 times a day, that's the max, that would pretty much keep you out of the terrible side effects that you would get with prednisone. It's
Oh, yeah.
considered physiologic, although you could reason well, I mean, clearly, I think we have to, that was then. I think what we're dealing with now, I think we have to think now, we've got to hone in a little deeper into, wait a minute, what about DHEA and pregnenolone? And what about the fact that the sulfated version is crucial? Now, it's not just turning on the brain pathways, modulating the voltage gated channels, which we're going to see if these patients that cannot talk, if they start talking again. I mean, imagine that. Imagine what brain conditions seem to have something in common? Brain fog, dementia, autism,
Yeah.
right? There's something, you know, dementia, and think of dementia.
Low
It,
DHEAS though
what's that?
it would need to you'd have to see a low DHEAS to treat them. Like there's different patterns of dementia.
Well, yeah, and sometimes what I like to do is I like to just say, what the hell is dementia?
Men-
And what's the word actually mean? And if you really look at it, I like to look at the Greek and the Latin root meanings, but it is dementation.
Yeah.
You're having degeneration of your mentality.
But there's so many different types of dementia. But you're talking about a specific form, which would be maybe a poor sulfation problem.
I'm saying, you know, I think we need to not get stuck on on only amyloid plaques and old people,
Oh yeah, we're past
that
that.
are demented with Alzheimer's and say, wait a minute, if somebody can't, or if they're so fatigued they can't organize and they're having trouble managing their life and they're forgetful, what why would that not be a form of dementia?
Hmm.
And that's just it's a question, and I think that's what we do best. We need to constantly redefine what it is, because otherwise this is what the world looks like from my eyes. It looks like, because there's no, it could be lots of things, but imagine if there's not a clear distinction, that we don't have, oh, brain fog. It's vague. You know, what I see is a society that has become dumbed down on average, slowed down, and they've lost their backbone. And nobody's saying anything about it. You know what I mean? Except for me and other people. But you know what I mean? It's like this is happening to us, and maybe because I have felt it more on average than, a lot more, it seems like, than the next person. But people, no matter who I talk to, they just don't seem concerned about anything. Oh yeah, it's just, you know what it is? It's business. A couple of
Oh no,
things.
I am concerned about this a
What's
lot.
that?
I'm very concerned about this. I see it all the time, and the low hormones, pregnenolone. I routinely find that, and of course, there's variability in test assays, but I see so low pregnenolone all the time.
Right? Yeah, and here's the thing. Before I didn't really know the significance, okay, of pregnenolone. I always just wondered, and it's because, you know what? So many things, you learn it, and if you really, when I really try to go back and say, well, really, 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 why, I can't find an answer within myself. Then I realized I got to go relearn this stuff. And really it's about having the epiphany, because memorization and all that stuff is not useful. You got to have a gut level knowing. And this right here, this is gut level knowing. This isn't repeat after me, or, oh, they said this, and, oh yeah, they're all talking about this now. No, I'm talking about it because I know it. And and guess what? It's probably going to be good for people like us and not for the masses, because the masses need to hear it. They need to see it on YouTube and everybody talking about it. Fine. I'm here to say this is knowing. This is gut level understanding to the core. I've laid it right out. You can't even deny it. And the great thing is that I'm already feeling results that it's like, it's like, for me, it's like heaven. Okay. So we have to up our game. We got to take what Dr. Halassa brilliantly came up with. Okay, brilliant. I'm serious about giving him kudos. This is serious, because now I think if we add these other components, now we have to figure out how do we get it out of it's just for research and not for use in humans and animals and blah, 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 blah. Why would that be? This might be the most important thing, period. Okay. Because if you don't have this, forget about it. If you try to take in this situation, when you're toxic and you've got bottlenecks and you've got hyperinflammation, if you try to take high doses of DHEA and pregnenolone, what's going to happen? You're going to convert to downstream to estrogen, and you're going to have more toxicity because you won't be able to you'll have trouble breaking down the excess estrogen, and then you're in trouble with too much estrogen. And that's also, some of those estrogens stimulate more interleukin 6 and Th17, and over proliferation, and the prostate grows, and the man boobs grow. and you know that your man chest is and your belly.
And it won't happen with DHEA.
When they're sticking, you know,
Seen
when
it.
you sit and they're sticking, and you go, "What the heck?"
Why wouldn't DHEAS convert to estrogen?
Because it would convert to testosterone, which would convert to estrogen.
Okay. But it still can convert. Yeah.
Well, why wouldn't it convert?
Of course. That's what you're saying. It doesn't convert. No, it does convert to. It will.
It does convert. Yeah. But we're already estrogen dominant because of all the mimickers,
Yeah.
all the imposters of estrogen, which is the plastic, which is the BPA for the most part, which keeps it's rigid. It's what keeps plastic rigid. And the rigid biological counterpart is the estrogen receptor. See, it's almost like, huh, somebody that it's amazing how it's like it makes you wonder, you know, accident, but we don't have to go there. Mechanisms: NMDA, nicotinic support, dopaminergic tone, stress resilience. Now, my personality type is dominant function is dopamine 2, which is explorative, connecting the dots, and logic, which is the NMDA glutaminergic system. So you can imagine the grief and stress that would cause somebody who is designed for innovation. But also as dominant traits, though, you have to understand it's the weaker traits in psychology that become weaker, and then you're kind of left with your dominant traits. So somebody said once you're becoming so um, introverted. Well, it's because I've lost my, the weaker functions that would make me more outgoing, right? Because all I can do is connect the dots and think about logic and figure this stuff out, which apparently I have. Neurosteroid research model. Okay, so then because those are excitatory, okay, and especially if you imagine somebody that might benefit who's autistic, who maybe can't speak, who knows, or they're just autistic, but they sort of have this tendency towards they've had seizures in the past. Well, everything needs to be balanced out. So pregnenolone and the DHEAS are excitatory. And so you need to balance that with GABA. Okay. And so progesterone, and they've got the more active version of progesterone, which is allopregnenolone. For some reason, it's called that. The issue is that the bioidentical form is only, well, it's FDA approved actually for IV for depression.
Yes.
Okay. And um, but the oral form is also FDA approved, but it is not bioidentical. And you don't want to mess with hormones when they're not bioidentical, right? I mean, you saw what happened with women and the taking hormones, progestin, and developing breast cancer. And maybe the estradiol was not the same exact molecularly same molecule. So right now, it may be better just to stick with the progesterone, and we'll see how it goes in our research project here at Lex Research Center.
Research? Right now, you're the only research mouse I know.
I'm the only research mouse,
Yeah. Anybody else done this? I don't know anybody.
No, no, no. I'm hardcore, man. Determined. But yeah, so we can stick with progesterone for now, unless, well, I guess the one mouse that's me, we'll see how it goes. I'll give you feedback. But there are some very concerned parents, patients parents that are desperately seeking solution. They want to see one wants to see her 16-year-old daughter talk.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big deal. She's not a retard. She
No.
just can't, they can't send they can't, the spark plugs are not functioning. So she can't push the neurotransmitters through the pathway, in particular in the area of speech and Broca's region. So it needs to translate into motor movement and expression, and that misfiring keeps her expression flat so that you can't quite tell what she's thinking. It's like, oh, well, hey, well, goodbye. Hey, how are you doing? And there's no expression. But she seems to understand things and understand what you're saying, or she's not stupid.
And this
So she,
has low DHEAS in the blood.
well, and that's what we're going to find out. Her genetics test, when I kind of had this epiphany, she had an older genetics test that showed that there's a high probability that she had bottlenecks in her detoxification system. So, and it didn't surprise me. And so, yeah, I think it's a good idea to measure these things to confirm. But when you think of what would modulate the voltage gated channels, well, the only thing I can think of is pregnenolone. Unless anybody else has any other ideas. And that they've done there's some studies out there utilizing, guess what? Pregnenolone sulfate.
Oh.
Ta-da! So, I mean, it stare at the wall and you go, gosh, maybe these solutions are right in front of our face. It just makes perfect sense. Mechanisms: GABA, A positive modulation, neuroinflammation, quenching, sleep, the sleep restoration part, I think, if somebody doesn't have to take stimulants, say somebody's on Adderall and a benzodiazepine to sleep, right? And it's artificial, you know what I mean? But what if they could be managed with the real stuff, the stuff that's missing, and then it's all natural, you
Right.
know? So, and that person would be me. Okay. Why this matters? Well, it could buffer psoriasis-driven hyperinflammation. It could improve cognition, mood, concentration, work performance. I don't know. I think I'm doing pretty good. Model for investigating systemic autoimmune fatigue syndromes. Conclusion: psoriasis equals systemic hyperinflammatory disease, not just skin rashes. Fatigue reflects immune, neuroendocrine, metabolic convergence. Conclusion part 2. Worthy of further investigation and translational research, in my opinion. Neurosteroids, Pregas, so I call it DHEAS, and allo, which is allopregnenolone, which is the active metabolite of progesterone. And I'm not so certain that progesterone has to necessarily go through the same sulfation and these pathways. So the bottlenecks may not be affecting progesterone, not to my knowledge. Detox pathway optimization, so that we can get rid of the stuff that's hyperinflaming the system, get rid of the metals, and also consider apheresis. You just take the blood and you pull off the plasma. I mean, that's where all it's the sewage. That's where all the chemicals are. And that, I mean, then you have to do the, chelation of some sort to, get those metals out of the tissues into the bloodstream so that you can pull them out of the plasma. And also that plasma can contain a lot of these lime-like contaminants and things that are mimicking and causing the production of the antibodies to all these different things, seemingly strategically. It's like, wow, it morphs into exactly the shape of a AMPA receptor. They're so smart, that billions of years of evolution. What else? Integrated immune neuroendocrine therapies. So here's my references to back up all of my stuff. It's a piecework. That's what it is. It's a piecework. It's not like, there's a journal that said, hey, have you heard of Pregnenolone S and DHEA? Did you know there's a difference? Well, guess what? It works. No. Any questions? I kind of thought that was fun.
Yeah, that's great.
As nobody's around. Any questions? Anybody curious?
Yeah, I have a question.
Ah,
I came in a little late, but
Happy New
what
Year.
seemed to me like this attack, it's systemic. It's dumbing people down systemically under where it's unconscious. They're not consciously aware of it until maybe it's later in the process.
Yes, exactly. What I found, and it's a combination of science and it's a combination of arts. Okay, because I didn't come across the emotional core of memory until I watched the clip of a movie, the Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. It was a clip where the guy wanted to forget about his girlfriend. He couldn't deal with the breakup, so there was a machine where this inventor, and ironically, this was in Montauk, which is apparently a place where they, a real place where they do a lot of mind experiments. But the scientists, it was the Jim Carrey character says, is this going to create any damage? And he said, well, I mean, it's going to, it's going to take away the emotional core of your memories. But yeah, I mean, you have to do damage to do that, but just kind of like just a bad hangover. That's all. Kind of funny. That's how I feel every morning, is I feel like I wake up with a hangover. But it seems like it's chipping away. If it's chipping away. Now, in the lecture I did on dementia, norepinephrine, when it comes to memory, norepinephrine and dopamine create the emotional core of memories. And especially the dopamine, the vividness comes from the norepinephrine, and the emotional, the sensation, the feeling of the memory comes from dopamine. And then you've got the glutaminergic system, which is the pure memory. And so you can see clearly how if you chip away at both, you blunt both of them, you will start to, you may put it like this. You'll probably, and I may be not quite accurate with this, you'll have your long-term memory like to a T, but you'll have short-term memory issues, and but your long-term memories start to become flattened. And that's
Eroded,
what's that?
maybe eroded.
Eroded. And so that's one of the things that I thought I was noticing. And then when I spoke to people who I would say are very intuitive, maybe spent a lot of time doing psychology, maybe practice as a psychologist, so they're really in tune with this. They said, that's exactly what I see. There is an emotional flatness to society. Okay, so it's not just me with these issues. To me, it's subtly happening. It's not like other people don't have chronic like syndromes and they don't have Epstein-Barr and all this stuff. It's just that they may not have this hyperinflammation that creates and polymorphisms to the extent, 1% to 2% of the population like me that have severe bottlenecks in detoxification. And so they may not have these crushing fatigue. I mean, to a degree that it's just beyond like.
I think you correlated it. I think you correlated it with a biochemical substrate.
What's that?
You correlated the phenomenon with a biochemical substrate.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's a biochemical. Which part of it? The biochemical
Substrate.
What's that?
Substrate. In other words, it's going on underneath that you're not going to be aware of. It's
Yes, exactly. It's chipping. The difference is I'm hyper aware because I'm hyper inflamed and it's severely adrenal fatigued. But if you're not, it could be chipping away without people necessarily, on average, without them necessarily realizing it.
Yeah, well, I'm saying if you can normalize it, you can feel the difference when you approach normality. If you compensate and correct for it, then it's having a very positive effect.
Oh yeah. Well, I didn't tell anybody over the weekend, and the response over the phone, if I spoke to somebody, was, "Wow, hey, you sound like you're doing a lot better." You know, um, that speaks for itself. Now, this is still a work in process. I mean,
yeah.
how it is a week from now and 2 weeks, but the door is open, and at least for some of us. Now, I always say that. I used to say everybody, but when I realized most people didn't want to hear what I had to say, I said, you know what? Well, then it's us.
I think that Stefan correlates everything, sees everything with optimal sports performance.
Exactly.
Being younger and being an athlete, he probably sees the differential in performance when things are more in balance.
Yeah, so exactly. Now, Stefan, I know you've had some complicated cases, and I know that you referred some people. My apology, if I had trouble reaching them, literally was because of shutdown fatigue. And again, it's not being lazy, it's not caring, it's not taking anything for granted. It's total mental shutdown where it's almost like when somebody cannot talk, okay? Like they can't talk. Well, they can't, the spark plugs aren't firing. It's similar to that. Like I can't return a text message. It's a debility. It's a severe debility. And think about somebody who has become demented, like in the traditional sense, they can't function. They might look normal, but they just can't. You can see that they're slipping. They can't get things done. Right?
It's not like you're burning the candle at both ends. There's no candle to burn.
There's no candle to burn. So it actually feels, you can't tell the difference. It's hard to tell the difference of whether it's burnout or, like you said, there's no candle to burn. Now, this lecture focused on the brain. It focused on the brain because that was, been the big topic. But these neurosteroids also affect the rest of the body because guess what? The kidneys have NMDA receptors and voltage-gated calcium channel receptors. So does the heart. We have dopamine receptors. We have these things in our rest of our body. So my question is, what effect would this have on other issues, say muscle atrophy, okay, or osteopenia, digestive issues, general aches and pains, the spine and libido.
Well, for sure. I mean, it's an anabolic steroid. I mean,
Right?
you need it.
Yeah. So when I looked into the literature, it may not necessarily have that muscle growth, but it may have effects on maybe performance and function. But it also modulates interleukin-6 and Th17 systemically. And I noticed that allergies, nasal congestion, and any hint of breathing issues started to, well, it's like one of those things I didn't realize. So I thought about it. I said, wait, I feel like my nose isn't as congested as.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm interested because I'm always congested.
Well, especially over the past month, it's like I feel like I've never been this congested. And it's like
It's
like
terrible. I've had to start wearing these nose strips. It helps open up my nose, my airway. It's essential.
that's when you sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, me too. And the sad truth is that I had to do a little nasal steroid and a little of the long-acting Afrin to ensure that those passages would stay open. And you know, I'm not so.
What
I
about
think it's a good idea.
CLA nebulization?
CLA is a different thing because I tried it and it's good if there's more of a pathogen root to it. This seemed like it was part of the Th17 Th2 allergic rhinitis, exacerbated by electromagnetic frequency and who else knows what stuff that we're breathing in. And my other concern was that, with contaminated products, which you can see under the microscope if anybody cares to look, my concern was squirting things in my nose that are contaminated. That's a little bit close to the brain there.
What about vitamin C, ascorbic acid at some point?
Vitamin C definitely helps. I've noticed that there's an antihistamine effect to it acutely, but I would say not a fix because I do take vitamin C on a regular basis or when I have IVs. This was seemingly had gone past a threshold. Like it was, I hadn't been congested like that consistently for since I was like in college or something, in high school and growing up. I had a lot of eczema, a lot of allergies. So this
This
was
sounds like a bottleneck we were talking about.
a bottleneck. Yeah,
Yeah.
bottleneck in my nose. That yeah. Yeah.
And
So
asthma would probably be the worst experience.
yeah, exactly. So it may be that there's also a mast cell stimulatory effect, and because they also are involved with cytokines and interleukin-6 and anything that's interleukin-6 and Th17 is consistent with moving in the direction of mast cell activation. So it may not be, I mean, I got some mixed messages from the literature, but it may not be a direct stabilizer of mast cell activation, but it certainly involves mast cells, and it must, because like I said, I noticed that my nasal passages were clear. I was like, wait a minute. It's like one of those things where I'm like, wait, is this improving? And the other thing is I've only been taking about half of the amount of the hydrocortisone. It's easier to get off of things like hydrocortisone when you have something like this to compensate. If you're just even 10 milligrams of hydrocortisone, if I were to stop that, like without this other stuff, without the DHEAS, I'd have to take a couple days off, or
Would it be like a paradoxical effect?
Paradoxical? What do you mean?
In other words, instead of opening it up, it closes up.
Oh, the nose?
The nose, the asthma breathing.
Well, fortunately, I haven't had true struggles with asthma of all the things, but I did notice that the breathing was easier. So there must have been a degree of
What I want to ask you, what does aminophylline do? Like they use that for asthma, and it's a way to get a similar effect without being so radical.
Heard of that?
What's it called?
Aminophylline.
I'm not familiar with that.
They give it to you in an ER when you have an asthma attack. They call it an aminophylline cocktail.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, I would think that they would give something like an epinephrine or something that
Probably related.
Yeah, but my point is the fatigue would have, to come off hydrocortisone, even that amount, you would not believe the amount of how hard it would be, the fatigue that would come with it. For me, there would be a lot of rebound inflammation just from low dose hydrocortisone. So having taken the sulfated DHEA, I have found that was an issue.
It's almost like trying to stop an addiction, but not that severe.
Well, it is severe, put it
It
like,
is severe, yeah.
yeah, in many ways, the pharmaceuticals are in a way as addictive or more addictive than what would be, considered street drugs. Try to get somebody off of Xanax. I mean, that is, or high blood pressure medicine. They'll go into a hypertensive emergency. So, we have to remind ourselves that any pharmaceutical has to be weaned off. And some of them, especially when you're dealing with hyperinflammation and things that help to keep it at least to the level that you can function. I mean, you take these things away and it's like, forget about it. Those are the crutches that keep at least in my situation, keep the brain moving, but not the ideal way to do it. And again, I think we can, in these extreme situations, I think this is a huge advantage to be able to supplement the bioidentically those adrenal hormones. I wonder if there's a name for them. Pregnenolone and DHEA. What would we call them? The precursors. Those could be that major game changer that can help you to get over the hump. If you can think and you can function, then you can move, then you can, then everything, then your metabolism improves. There's a lot of things that can happen, that can start to turn things in a positive direction. So, but you got to have the whole thing. You have to detox baths. You got to do the sauna, relentlessly, especially if you've got bottlenecks in your detox pathways. Then you're going to have to sweat it out, and just continue to become cleaner and cleaner. Go to Stefan's boot camp. That's another step. Keep learning, and yeah, and that's what it is. Next time, I think I'm gonna break down the detox pathways and genetics and simplify it so that we can see clearly, instead of guessing. We can have an entire detoxification system. All it is filling in the gaps. You got to get methylation handled before you can take care of sulfation, and you got to do it step by step. And I've got a little organizer there where I'm going to have little labels, and I've got my methylation, ones labeled. I've got my sulfation tray. I've got my and Stefan has some ideas too, where maybe Quicksilver has combinations, but this is what I know right now. And once you know it, then at least again, you don't have to guess. I got it right here. It just, I've got it on my refrigerator, and all I'm doing is I'm just filling in the gaps of each pathway to make sure I'm not missing anything. And most importantly, to make sure I'm not guessing. No more guessing. This is not the time to guess, especially if you're critical like me, or there's others that are even more critical. I want to finally get the confusion out of this stuff, and we got to make it simple, because it's getting harder and harder to think. And simple, but to the point, and cover the basis so that we can stop guessing. That's the purpose. And with that, any questions? 9:30.
Yeah, one last comment. Talking about asthma, how is it that glutathione, like ready sorbate glutathione, can stop an asthma attack?
I didn't know that.
And
I never
one
seen
time
that.
I was with Dr. Lewis, and I had some asthma to one of his standard poodles, right? And I took some Ready-Sorb. I held it under my tongue for a minute, and then 5 minutes later, the asthma attack was abated.
What was it called? Oh, this was a glutathione.
Yeah, Ready-Sorb glutathione.
Sublingual?
Well, yeah. I mean, well, I think the answer is probably straightforward. I mean, that one is a situation where I think just simply buffering the redox, is enough to reduce the inflammatory mast cell IgE response, whatever it is, just enough to calm it down. I remember once I was treating my mother with an IV methylene blue for something else, but it was like right away her breathing improved, and she has asthma. And then, by the way, that there was I forget what it was, cat's claw or something that you would recommend.
Yeah, cat's claw is good too.
Yeah, she responded to that as well. I don't know the mechanism, but that worked really well. Another thing that worked really well is the first time she took methylated B12 and folate. It was like in fact, she lost the need for the inhalers. She didn't need to use the inhalers every day. And she had like 2 inhalers that she had to use, consistently every single day, morning and nighttime, and rescue inhalers and all this stuff. And just methyl B12 and folate cleared it up. So, that tells me that probably that allowed maybe homocysteine levels were able to convert to glutathione and not or methionine converted to glutathione instead of homocysteine, which would circulate and trigger more inflammation, and that the increased glutathione production maybe calmed down the asthma. You know what I mean? So I think it still comes down to buffering the redox.
Also, homeopathy and acupuncture, and then what Dr. Burgess talks about homeopuncture. There's some very interesting ways to approach the pathways.
Yeah,
Methods.
yeah, I'm always happy to have more breakthroughs with, with methods like acupuncture. I can understand because to me, yeah, it's probably like you're getting straight to the autonomic nervous system. You know what I mean? You're modulating it directly.
Well, how does photobiomodulation have a direct effect on things, on inflammation and things so forth?
Well, according to the lectures that we had before with Dr. Halassa, that the red light is being absorbed by the cytochrome C enzyme in the mitochondrial electron chain. And when you're inflamed like that, you're talking about asthma or just in general?
Asthma, allergy,
Okay. Well,
stomach pain.
yeah. So basically, once you energize that cytochrome C oxidase, that will literally be able to convert more oxygen into water.
Mhm.
Okay, so it'll pull the electron transport chain forward, whereas when the mitochondria has a lot of oxidative stress, the sort of electron, the mitochondrial engine, kind of like a bottleneck, it starts becoming inefficient and it can't quite um, uh, produce or go from step to step to step um, to the last step, which involves cytochrome oxidase to buffer all of those oxygen radicals. So then those oxygen radicals build up.
Well, you're teaching a new paradigm, and we're also saying that different paradigms are interrelated.
Yeah, that
It's kind of fascinating.
yeah, the cool thing is that, it would have been fun to be able to do this right at the get-go. Um, the reality is that it always makes sense when it's finally unraveled. And usually the answers are there's something missing. It could be that sulfation issue. Okay, it's like the missing piece, but you don't even know to look for it. All those complicated pathways and trying to work out the mechanisms, and the problem is working through the misinformation, the being led down the wrong path, memorizing things and realizing you don't really quite understand it, because when you do figure it out, there's no memory is needed. You know it. And it's usually more simple than you think. Neurology, when you're thinking about somebody who's autistic or all these different conditions and they have different movements, it looks like, oh my God, he's got to see a neurologist who may not actually be able to tell you anything sometimes. I mean, it seems to be the case, at least with patients I see. But if you just consider everything has order, there's always a pattern. And if you could see, wait a minute, this pathway does this pathway does this pathway does this. Okay, if they got this, and it's this pathway, that pathway, then you got to know, okay, well, there must be antibodies to it. Okay, now there's multiple levels, but once the thinking gets organized, the more organized it gets about it, the easier it is to think about what's going on. Because I'll tell you, from my experience, when I don't have a way to think about it, it's just pure, utter confusion. And then I don't like to sugarcoat things with patients or tell them, or I don't want to say, oh, well, everything's okay when I really don't believe it. You know, I want to be clear. And if I'm not clear, then I got to tell the patients, well, look, I think we've got some work to do on this. You know, the answer's out there somewhere because we seem to find them. We just have to keep digging.
It's like you're stuck in Plato's dark tunnel with no light.
Yeah, that's what it feels like a
Yeah.
lot of times. Um, I'd have to read up on Plato a little bit but yeah,
But light at the end of the tunnel, that's what that's related to.
yeah, and that's where this stuff gets fun. I mean, you know, when the answer reveals itself, and you have to stick to you have to be confident about this. I also realize because as soon as you figure it out, it's like everybody's ready to prove you wrong. I mean,
Yeah, but it's also
it's
like
like
research.
you have this great gift that could, you know, let's see how this is correct, not how we can figure out every reason why it can't be correct. It's like, why?
Well, research has to be fueled by passion.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Big time.
you can't do this. This would make brain fog worse if there were no passion. Anyways, guys, this is great. Let's call it a night unless anybody else has anything else to say. All right, cool. All
Very
right.
nice. Nice.
See y'all later. Thanks, Stefan.